Hi, and welcome to the second webinar with Amy Griboff, elder law attorney in Rockville, Maryland. My name's Harry Moore. I'm an agent with EXP Realty, and I'm going to hand it over to Amy. We're going to go through some more great tips for you to know when you're thinking about estate planning. Amy, it's all
Okay.
yours.
Okay. Thank you, Harry. And I love working with you, and I'm thrilled that we can talk about some more common mistakes people make about their estate plan. And today's focus is going to be about advance directives. And an advance directive is a legal document that is created by individuals over the age of 18, and usually it has anywhere from 2 to 3 sections. And the advance directive first section is going to appoint somebody to make decisions, medical decisions for you, if you can't make them for yourself. The second section often is called a living will, or what it does is describes generally 3 different kinds of medical conditions, like a terminal condition, an end stage condition, a coma, and what kind of care you would want if you were having one of those medical conditions. And then sometimes the last section that might be part of a document is about whether you want to be an organ donor, if you've made decisions about funeral, burial kinds of plans. So that's what we're going to be talking about, the different, with an advanced directive, what kind of mistake can happen. So we're going to go over to slide 1 for mistake number 1. And mistake number 1 is that my advanced directive will be found in an emergency. So I'm going to share with you a story. I hate the word story because it's a true story.
Mhm.
And this is not made up. And I was the guardian of my grandmother. That's how I kind of got into, went to law school, and have been helping people for the last 20 years. So before law school, I'm guardian of my grandmother, and I had to make her medical decisions. She was in a nursing home. She had advanced dementia, could not make them for herself. And what I did, because I never knew when there might be an emergency, is I drove around with my legal documents in my glove compartment, just in case I got called in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, whenever, and I had to jump in my car and rush to the hospital. I wanted somebody to know that I was able to make medical decisions. And but what I found is that a lot of people, do these advanced directives and put them away in their file cabinet. And then in an emergency, or even sometimes in a planned, if you're having planned surgery, you want to be sure you bring your advanced directive to the hospital with you. But the mistake is, in an emergency, if you end up at the hospital because you're unconscious in a car accident, or you slipped into, maybe you were having a medical condition, but something happened and you had a stroke, or anyway, um, that this document isn't going to be found. And so what I recommend is, your agent shouldn't be driving around with this medical document in their glove compartment. There are other options. So what I've learned as being a lawyer is that there's a couple of different organizations out there where once you do your medical document, you want to be sure to share it um, in a way that is going to be convenient for the hospital to find it. And so one is called DocuBank. I often recommend DocuBank to my clients. Do not receive any proceeds from DocuBank for recommending their services, but I've been working with them for over 20 years. And so again, once you do your advanced directive, you can upload it to my DocuBank, And so that, and then DocuBank sends you a card and you put that card in your wallet. So if you end up at the hospital unconscious, or again, you have scheduled surgery, you just pull out this card, give it to the hospital, and they can get your advance directive. You don't have to be driving around with it in your glove compartment.
Right.
There's another organization is called mydirectives.com. Again, another option for uploading your advance directive. And those links can be found, I'm sure, in the at the end. I'm sure you'll have my
Yep.
website,
Yep. I will have a
right?
link to your website
Yep.
in the notes below, so anybody can go over there and learn more about your practice and see those links if they are interested in those services.
Absolutely, yes. So you'll just go to my website, go over to the page that says resources, and there are several advanced directive resources there. So that's mistake number one. We want to be sure that your advanced directive can be found in an emergency. So don't leave it to chance. So
Right. All
mistake
right.
number two. Okay. So mistake number two is my advanced directive will be followed by my agent. So, the advance directive, it's a legal document and people believe that it will be followed. And unfortunately, I educate my clients that it doesn't always get followed. So let's explain why that could happen. So, one issue is that perhaps your agent is close. They might close is in related related to you or emotionally connected to you. Could be a spouse, could be adult children, folks like that who might be named in your legal document to make medical decisions for you. But in that emotional medical situation where your agent has to step into your shoes and follow your wishes, I have met with several agents, and it's difficult to follow your loved one's medical decisions. It might be, again, because emotionally the agent's close to you. It might be a decision where the hospital's asking whether uh, the person should be taken off a ventilator. Should artificial hydration nutrition be withdrawn? And that agent might feel like, oh my goodness, I am killing this person by disconnecting them from a ventilator, from artificial hydration, nutrition. And that guilt is can really weigh on the agent.
Right.
So that, yeah, that's one reason. And I know another reason, Harry, you and I have talked about, if you want to share a little bit about being an advocate uh, as an agent and maybe not knowing the medical jargon that a doctors might be talking to you as an agent. I don't know if you want to kind of.
Yeah. Well, so I had an experience with that when my mother was ill. She There was a time where she had to go to the emergency room, and it just so happened that I was relatively close by, so I could get over there quickly. But more important, her husband's eldest son was in town. He lived in Cincinnati, but he was in town visiting, just coincidentally, and he was a doctor. He is a doctor. And so we all converged at the emergency room, and luckily he was there and he could step in and talk the talk with the doctors and nurses who were there in the ER. And I am convinced 100% that if he hadn't been there to sort of take the helm and uh, let them know, what should happen, that my mother would have died right there in the ER on the
Mm,
table.
yeah,
Um, so I think that having an advocate in lots of things in life. I mean, life is complicated these days, and having and healthcare is very complicated. I think
yeah,
we all know that. But
yeah.
anyway, that's my little story.
Well, thank you for sharing, Harry. So, again, with mistake number two, your agent might have difficulty because they're emotionally connected
Mhm.
to the situation. Might be hard for them to make a decision. They might not know that they can advocate for you, that they can ask questions of the doctor, that if they don't like what the doctor is advising, that they could go, there's ethics committee at every hospital. So sometimes we need to get an ethics committee involved. Sometimes the agent even needs to decide that, gee, this hospital and this doctor isn't, following what I think is written on the legal document, and we maybe need to move them to a different hospital. So these are just some of the reasons why, even though we have an advance directive and it says what our wishes are, sometimes they don't get followed. So
Right.
I think we're going to jump over to number three.
Okay.
Mistake
Voila.
number three. Yes, my advance directive will be followed if I do not want CPR. So a lot of advance directives um, talk about what kind of medical wishes you would like. Again, in terminal conditions, in a coma, and a variety of different medical conditions. And and it might say, I do not want CPR. The reality is that if you are found unconscious with no pulse, and the EMTs are called, they come on the scene, and maybe you have an advance directive that says, I don't want CPR. The EMTs are required by law to still give you CPR.
Mhm.
And so that's important to understand your advance directive, although it might say you do not want CPR, the EMTs are still required, even though it's a legal document. Now, the question is, well, if that's what your medical wishes are and you don't want CPR under any circumstance, well, if the advance directive isn't going to work, what will? So, um, what will work, if under no circumstances you ever want CPR, is something that a lot of people are familiar with. It's an old term, which I'll use here, DNR, do not resuscitate. That's the old kind of document that used to be filled out at the hospital.
Mhm.
Now, in a lot of states, in Maryland, where I'm licensed, it's called the MOLST, MOLST. That's the medical orders for life sustaining treatment. And it's the O, order. This is not a document that's going to be signed by the client and their attorney or any witnesses. This is a medical order. It will be signed by a physician. There's a couple other people, like perhaps a nursing and nurse, an NP,
Nurse
nursing
practitioner.
practitioner. Thank you.
Mhm.
There's a couple other folks other than just a MD who can sign this MOLST form. Again, in Maryland, it's the MOLST. In other states, it could be the POST, POST. Some states have the POLST. They all every state has kind of made their own little decision on what they're going to call it.
Mhm.
Um, but this medical order signed by a doctor, if it says that you do not want CPR under any circumstance, again, under this situation where an EMT comes on the situation and finds no pulse, no, not any breathing, and you have the MOLST form, then the EMT is not required to, to do CPR. So not everybody should have a MOLST form, but
So
yes, Harry, I think you were going to have a question
yeah,
there.
I was just going to say, so does this sort of get back to what you had to do before and carry it around in the glove box? Do people have to keep that with them, or is there some sort of a like online clearinghouse where they could take your look at your wallet, see what your name is, and then look your name up in a database?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when the EMT comes to your house, let's say you've collapsed in your house and you're unconscious, and they
Hmm.
come on the scene, they know there are certain places that we educate our clients about. Where do you want to put the most? It might be on your refrigerator, over by the front door. So EMTs are trained to look for this legal document.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're walking down the street. If the same scenario happens, you're not in your home.
Right.
Some people will have a bracelet
Mm.
that
Oh.
says, no, CPR.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
the yeah. So
So
the yeah. Go ahead.
I'm curious, do most in your experience, um, let's say for every 10 clients of yours who have the intention that they don't want to be resuscitated, how many of them fill out that form as opposed to just having it as part of the documents that they might, that the hospital might be able to access? And to me, there's sort of two different situations, right? There's and I don't
Mhm.
know, maybe people who don't want to be resuscitated don't want to be resuscitated at all, versus um, just sort of dragging things out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
My question?
Yeah, yeah. So with the most form, just like the advanced directive, if you're going to upload your advanced directive, you also have the most form. You would also want to be
Hmm.
sure that was uploaded so that the hospital could find it once the EMT brought you there. If again you didn't have a bracelet, or you weren't at
Right.
home and they didn't find it there, so that the most could be looked at when you arrived at the hospital. Um, and my practice is, because it's estate planning and elder law, I would say that my practice skews on the um, older clients.
Hmm.
So
Sure.
I would say more clients than not might have the advanced directive and the most form. But
Interesting.
if you and I, if we're healthy, we don't have any terminal illness, we don't have a chronic medical condition, most
Hmm.
healthy people are not going to have the most form. The
Gotcha. I
most
understand.
form
That makes
is
sense.
really um, something for certain individuals, certain populations, and that have certain medical uh, concerns and things like that. So, and that's one of the reasons that we don't want, you know, people try to just, download documents off the internet, and they think that, they'll be able to complete them. And so, getting legal advice about, what you need. Do you need the advance directive? I speak to my clients about, there's this most form out there, and,
Mhm.
maybe it's appropriate for you, maybe it's not, Medicare, if you are covered by Medicare, Medicare covers the cost of having a consultation. Again, if you're appropriate, well,
Mhm.
if you're on Medicare, uh,
Right.
um, to have a conversation with your doctor about the most form, even
Hmm.
if you decide not to cover it,
Right.
or excuse me, for you and the
Not to use
doctor
it.
not to complete it,
Hmm.
it's still covered for a consultation with under Medicare. So, people need to know that it's a conversation they should be having with their doctors. The doctor will fill it out with the client, but that's all about mistakes about the advance directive that I commonly come across. And I hope that this video has clarified some mistakes that people make, and that they will get legal advice to have a document drawn up or reviewed, to be sure that their wishes are followed.
Great. Well, Amy, as always, I always learn something from you when we talk. So I appreciate your time, And I'll make sure that in the remarks below, there's a link if people want to check out your website. And you have a terrific YouTube video on there too. Your intro video. That was one of the first things that caught my eye when I first saw your website. So thanks again, everybody, for checking this out. And if you have any questions for Amy, her contact information will be below. And if you have any questions for me, mine will be there too. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Harry.
Bye bye.
Bye.